Hello, and welcome to another Old Scams in Shiny New Packages podcast. On these podcasts, we use 20th century experiences and ideas to better understand 21st century scams, risks, and potential approaches. My name is John P. Rayberger, and I'm here with my podcasting collaborator, Don Wood. Hello, Don.
Hello, John, and looking forward to talking about websites and storefronts this afternoon.
Good. I think this one fits very well within our underlying theory that people can use 20th century experiences to help them better deal with 21st century problems. And I think this is a great example of that. And I hearken back to my days when I was traveling before there was Google Maps, before GPS was available to everybody. And you would wander around, let's say, a street in Europe, and you wanted to go to a restaurant, and you were told this was a really good restaurant, but you weren't exactly sure where it was. So you were told the name of the restaurant, but of course they said it in French or German or Slavic, so you weren't really sure what the name was. And you also, a lot of restaurants in old parts of Europe don't really have obvious signage. And even if they did have obvious signage, you couldn't necessarily read the sign if it was in Slavic or non-Latin characters. So what you'd do is you'd walk around with your map in hand through the streets and go, okay, I'm looking for this restaurant where I'm supposed to meet these people. I have no idea where it is. Is this it? Well, one way to confirm that it's it is by looking at the address for the restaurant. Locations in the world tend to have street and street number addresses. And so one way to validate whether you're at the right restaurant in the right area in the right town is to look at the street sign, which is very common, and the street number. And that's how you do it. Well, the same is also applicable to websites. You can think of a website as basically a company storefront. The problem is that a scammer will send you something that looks like a storefront of something familiar, but is in fact their server that they have set up to scam you. It'll look like you're at the Bank of America website because what they've done is they've copied the Bank of America website, but it'll look a little off and maybe you'll have a gut feel that something's kind of not right. So one way to do it is use your 20th century experience and validate the street address, or in this case, the web address. If you're in the browser, you go up to the top and you look at the web address. And those are unique for the world, basically. And so if you're used to going to www.target.com and it says www.target.com.ru/567123, that's probably the wrong address. And I'd be very suspicious of that. So you can use the same mental model that you did in the 20th century by validating a location by looking at an address in the 21st century by validating the web address for whatever location on the World Wide Web you're trying to get to. Does that make sense?
It does. I think there are challenges there, though, John. Did you want to continue with this, or should I?
No,
Okay.
I like your feedback.
Yeah, so that's true. We're validating an address like 5 Salem Lane, for example. And you know physically that the mailbox says 5 and you are on Salem Lane. You're looking at those street signs. You know that's 5 Salem Lane. The interesting thing about the typical screen nowadays, if you look up at the address bar, that is the website that you're looking at, it's some of the smallest fonts on your screen, at least for me, and I suspect others. They're tiny fonts, and the periods are microscopic. And if you don't have wonderful vision, or if you're in a hurry, you might not be able to tell that this isn't bankofamerica.com, but it's actually Bank of America without the I in America. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah,
That that
that's a
losing one letter, you're not going to notice that I. If the website looks good and clean and it looks just like what you remember Bank of America looking like, bingo, you're in. You've just been sucked in. I don't know. I know for me, I don't always look at that address bar. I go with what it looks like on the screen. The address bar is difficult to read.
It is. And that is one reason why people have started moving to apps. Now, apps are a technique to get around this. They have their own limitations, they have their own problems, but an app is a way to get around it. The other thing you can do is if you use bookmarks or favorites or something like that, is if you have a Bank of America account, you go to your bookmark instead of a link that's included in an email message or a text message, you go to a link for Bank of America because that's what you trust. So, my suggestion is for people who may have difficulty seeing, one option is if you get a message that says your Bank of America account is overdrawn, you must go in there right away, and you get a link. Don't use that link. Go to your trusted favorites with your bookmarks and click on it there because that's
Mhm.
the one you've used in the past. That's the one you've trusted. And in many ways, that's like going to a restaurant in the old days that you've been to multiple times. You may not know the address, but you've used it and you've trusted it in the past. And so you go back there because you're one of the regulars. That's one answer. On a phone or a tablet, the other answer is to use an app. Now, apps to me are kind of like, you remember Filene's Basement from Boston?
Oh, yes.
There was a
Yes.
famous store called Filene's, and in the basement is where they used to sell discounted
Mm.
clothing and specifically bridal gowns. And so brides to be who wanted a inexpensive bridal gown would go to Filene's basement and get a bridal gown there at lower cost than they would up in Filene's itself. So to me, an app is like Filene's Basement. It's a hassle to get to because you have to load it on your phone. You typically have to set up and or validate an account for the app. But once you're there, it's very safe and secure. So it's a hassle to get to Filene's Basement. The hours are not the same as Filene's, but once you're there, you're safe and secure. And so one option for people who have a tablet and maybe don't prefer not to go to websites is to have someone help you set up an app and go through the hassle of setting it up and logging in and then using an app on a tablet or a phone. And the security of those things is one reason why apps have become fairly popular in recent years.
The list of apps that are available, I know I use iPhone. You go to the App Store, there's a lot of apps there. Presumably, each one of those apps has been checked by Apple so that those apps you can be darn sure are legitimate apps. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are a few that sneak through every now and then, and there's other tricky stuff too, like in-app purchases and stuff. But one of the big attractions of using the app is that the App Store on Apple or the Play Store on Google, which is their app store, does have some quality assurance for the quality of the apps that's conducted by Apple and Google. In other words, if you can't just put an app up in their store, you have to go through a review process essentially. And I may be wrong about this, but I think if there's enough people that complain about how scammy an app is, I think they're required to take it down. Because I know in the past there have been ones on the Google Play Store that have been accused of being platforms for scams, and they were forced to take them down.
Mhm.
So it's more secure, but it's also more of a hassle to set up.
It's a hassle to set up and to keep them updated. I've noticed lately that I've wanted to use an app to save money using digital coupons in a grocery store, and this has happened to me two or three times where the app is it needs to be updated. So you're in a store with not a very good connection. You're dying to save $2 on Klondike bars, but you need to digitally clip a coupon. You go to the the store app and you get a little message saying needs update. Or in terms of Apple, it's a little cloud with an arrow. And that cloud means, well, you have to update. Just a minor annoyance. And I guess these apps will being annoying. Nothing is perfect in the world. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is if you have a choice, use the app.
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, the attraction of the World Wide Web is, for example, it's pervasively available. For example, if you're in a hotel setting that has a public internet and you want to print something out, it's a whole lot easier to print something out from that local computer, for example, than to try to print something out from your app. Also, depending on your home computer, you're much more likely to get websites on your home computer, and you're much more likely to get apps on a tablet or a phone. So it just different tools for different situations. You're right, apps all require updates and they all are updated all the time. And then sometimes it's sometimes hard to find an app on a phone. If you
Oh,
have a
yeah.
lot of them, I mean, you may have, dozens of apps, and then you're like, okay, where'd it go? And your phone is updated, and maybe they move stuff around, or you fat finger something and move it around by accident, which has happened to me. Apps can be challenging to deal with. And I think for older people, apps can be a little challenging because maybe they have bad eyesight. Maybe some of the apps look a lot alike, or the whole concept of app is very unfamiliar with them. The personal computer and the web browser has been around a lot longer. So I think apps can be intimidating for some older people, and they can be confusing. I mean, even the phone screen is typically a lot smaller than a computer screen. Your personal challenges associated with seeing the address bar notwithstanding.
Remember H&S green stamps?
Sure.
You collect them and you could save pennies on a dozen eggs.
Yes.
Let's go back to that, John.
Well, we have a different podcast that we're going to talk about about how the world changes and how to help deal with the changing world. But you can go back to that. I suspect S&H green stamps are still out there, but they're just not as popular as other electronic tools nowadays.
Well, I would go back to that. I suspect you wouldn't
I would
because
not.
you enjoy this new world. And it is pretty amazing how human beings invent these new innovations and they come from the minds of brilliant people in laboratories out in California. And within 2 or 3 years, they become ubiquitous in the population, and that we're all expected to get on board and use these devices. And this is a case in terms of digital coupons, and it's just my own bête noire for now because I had a frustrating experience, as you can tell, yesterday in a grocery store. It's in the case of really quick actions that the app model begins to break down, it seems to me. It's really good at some things, but little things like saving $2 with a digital coupon, I just don't think they've mastered that yet.
No, they may not have in your situation. An app is a tool, a website is a tool. It's a tool for helping you, but every tool has its limitations. Apps are more secure. That's the big attraction. They are more secure. And that is because you can have confidence that the app is dealing with the company's server that sponsored the app. That's the big attraction of it, especially after you've what's called authenticated. That is, you create an account there. That's a relatively secure way of doing it. Matter of fact, before the web browser became popularized in the 1990s, computers used to have all these little apps on your screen. In the late 80s and early 90s, that's exactly what they had. They had all these little apps. They weren't called apps, they were called clients back then. So to connect to a system, you had all these little icons on your screen. And for every system, you had to open this little software on this icon on your screen to get to that particular server. And the web browser was supposed to solve that by becoming what's called a universal client. That is, you didn't have to go to all these little icons on your screen to go to each server. You could go to one application called the web browser, as Mosaic, then Netscape, then Internet Explorer, and now mostly Chrome, in that you could go to all these different bookmarks and go to one piece of software. Now, ironically, the Apple approach and the Google approach has moved us back toward having all these little icons,
Oh, that's interesting.
back to what's called the client server model.
Hmm.
But the client server model actually preceded the web browser. It's just different tools have different advantages and disadvantages associated with them.
And the young kids all know this, and our podcast is geared towards older folks. But essentially, the app really is like a front door to the store. And
It's actually more than that because there are things that use the processing power on your phone to work with the app. It all depends upon how the architect of the app wants your phone to work with their system. Because some things, for example, locality, if they want to know exactly where you are, and let's say you're a chain store and you want customer to know exactly where the local store is, an app will use the phone's information to figure out what the nearest chain store is. For example, if you're at McDonald's, they'll want to know your location, so they'll want to send you to the nearest McDonald's. And so an app allows for that level of customization fairly easily. So it's more than just a front door. It can have quite a bit of functionality in it, but it totally depends upon how the app is designed to work. Does that make sense?
it does. And you just opened up a big door here when you talked about the location services of an app. And that has always puzzled me. And I usually say no. In fact, I think I have a global setting, no location services. I don't want to be pinged. I don't want people to see exactly where I am. Not that I'm anywhere special. Usually I'm at home. But there's something spooky about Safeway or McDonald's needing to know where I am before I can order a cheeseburger.
Well, the reason that McDonald's wants to know where you are is so that they can either send the cheeseburger to you from the nearest restaurant or send you to the nearest restaurant to get a cheeseburger. They know where their restaurants are, but they don't know where you are unless you let them know. And that's why they typically request location services.
Yeah, well, I don't want them to know. So it
Well,
works
then,
without the location service. You don't have to have that on. And it's a battery drain. But it
right.
is spooky because these location services are astonishingly accurate. I mean, it will know that you're in a certain part of your home.
Yeah. Well, it does it in a variety of different ways. One way it does it is it can triangulate off the cell towers. So it can tell what cell towers you're hitting. Now, the app has to have be able to access the network location services, but it can tell based on the cell towers. Also, depending how close you are to a store that you're connecting to, it can tell where you are relative to that store by you connecting to the Wi-Fi of a store, for example. There are other techniques too, using IP addresses, using a bunch of other things, but the core problem here regarding location is essentially to what degree you view it as privacy. And as we said before, there's no guarantee to privacy in the US Constitution, and privacy laws are fragmented by state and industry and function and things like that. And so it's not clear, honestly, most of the time, whether your location is in fact a private function or a public function. And the reason this gets real is that some alerts are sent out in a certain area. For example, an amber alert or a flood alert or a hailstorm or tornado alert. NOAA and other federal organizations use cell phone service to send out alerts to certain areas. And for that reason, it helps for them to know where you're located because
Hmm.
they don't want to send one out for somebody in Massachusetts for a hurricane that's going to happen in Florida. And so it's useful to have location services turned on sometimes. It is used by some people. It's kind of a tricky one because just because your location services are not specifically turned off on your phone does not mean that they know approximately where you are. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to use it for malicious reasons either, because it's by definition not permanent. Maybe your house is, but if you're moving around with your cell phone, your location service is perishable. Does that make sense?
Oh, develop that perishable.
Well, I mean,
What do you?
if you travel, then your location is, wherever you're traveling to. And so it changes all the
Oh,
time,
constantly
presumably.
moving. I see. I wonder if one has their cell phone on all the time, and we all do, and we carry it with us everywhere. So it's always pinging another tower, depending on where you're moving. Do you think that there is a record of one's cell phone location that is more or less a permanent record?
Yes. I think Verizon, AT&T, yes, I think they keep a record. I'd have to validate this by doing more research, but I think somewhere along the line I saw that major network providers do keep a record for your whatever tower you're pinging on.
And if you put your phone on airplane mode, that pretty much eliminates the ability to track your location.
No.
Oh, develop that. I'd like to
Well,
hear more about that.
because again, they can tell by if you hit certain servers, even if you hit certain routers, they can tell sometimes. So specific location mode is hard to find. General location mode is easier to find. Not only that, from what I understand, is that your phone still communicates with towers, even if you're not getting data from the tower.
So even if you're on airplane mode, there's still some pinging back and forth somehow.
I believe so. I believe your phone is occasionally sending out messages or towers are sending out messages.
Yeah,
I
I've heard
think
that
that's
too.
how they do what's called traffic management because they're looking for all the potential phones that are out there and they're saying, okay, do we have enough basically tower bandwidth to handle it?
Mhm.
So I believe that's true. Again, I'd have to confirm that, but
I've heard that too. I've heard it too, that that's not a full that turning putting your phone on airplane mode is not a foolproof thing if you want to keep your location hidden. But I would imagine turning your phone off completely would.
yes,
Or a novel idea, just don't carry a cell phone
yes,
when you want to go somewhere where you don't want to be tracked.
yes,
Go old school.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, but that's far away from the storefronts. So here's something that happened to me, and this is a storefront situation. I ordered a piece of furniture from a store, West Elm, quality furniture store. I bought a piece of furniture from them and I asked for it to be delivered. And about a week later, I received a text message from Williams Sonoma saying that my product was to be delivered. And would you please click on this link to schedule delivery? And the link was to a company name I'd never heard of. So again, the product was bought at West Elm. The text message came from Williams Sonoma, and it directed me to a delivery company that I'd never heard of. There was no other explanation. So I happen to remember or somehow suspect that West Elm and Williams Sonoma are part of the same company. In fact, I
Hmm.
think Williams Sonoma is the parent company, and West
Hmm.
Elm is part of that. But I hadn't heard of whoever this delivery company was. So there was confusion in this text message.
Hmm.
I went on with it. I clicked on the company that I'd never heard of, and it looked pretty legitimate. Put in your delivery time and date that you'd like to have it and so on. And it worked.
Hmm.
Totally worked.
Yeah.
No problem. But man, that looked like a kind of a fuzzy text message.
Yeah. And
Oh,
I think I think in those situations, you have every right to suspect it might be a scam. And therefore, you'd have to go through the various validation processes. My suggestion would be to call the original furniture order company and say, should I trust this company called, XYZ Delivery? And anybody there who has been around the business should say, yes, that's fine. The other thing is when you go on the website, there should be information about you that is very specific. For example, it should match the product description on the website should exactly match what you ordered. And if it doesn't, then you need to be suspicious. And the last thing is, do they ask for more money? Do they ask for, oh, our payment
Yes.
our payment has not been received in full.
Right,
We
right.
need $1,000. That would make me suspicious. So, validation, specific information on the website that you don't provide, and three, are they asking for something that, seems inappropriate?
Yeah. It's a few extra steps in what is supposed to be a extremely fast, convenient, and efficient system. But because these are inventions and products created by human beings, there's always that possibility of fraud. It just happens that almost every day I get an email saying that my invoice is being processed. Please look at this PDF. And of course, it's for some ridiculous thing I never bought, and I never worry about it. But you get so many of these, one gets so many of these, at least that I do, that when you get a legitimate one that is just a little bit shady, you just think, man, that's shady.
Yeah.
And
And you
I'm not
should,
going to deal with that.
yeah, and you should be suspicious of it. I mean, you have every valid reason to be suspicious. And I think people develop what I would describe as kind of a gut feel because it's based upon years of experience of things like this. And I think that's people should listen to their gut, consider their gut, and go through the various validation steps and maybe ask somebody else, a friend or a loved one or a millennial or something like that,
Yes.
and validate this stuff. People have every right and reason to be suspicious about things.
Hmm.
Okay, anything else, Don?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, then I will finish this off by saying don't be afraid because modern scams are just old scams in shiny new packages. Farewell.
Here, here.